Hello, I am Pauletta Hansel, even though you can't see my face. And with me is Jim Alford, who, as you can see, is my very talented hairdresser. He's going to be turning me into a beauty
Yes.
between now and then.
All right.
And I, of course, am here again for an interview for the Urban Appalachian Community Coalition Story Gathering Project, which Jim has graciously agreed to do. So Jim, if you could start out by smiling for the camera and saying your name and where you live now, what community you live in now.
So my name is Jim Alford, and I live in Loveland, Ohio.
Oh, okay, I didn't know you were in Loveland.
Yeah, I'm to
See,
Loveland.
all the things you learn when you
Yeah.
when you're doing these interviews. So I'm going to start by asking Jim a question that I know the answer to, and it's not the usual one I begin with, but it makes sense for this particular interview. And Jim, that is, if you could tell us when and where, if you choose, is the first time that you might have considered the possibility that you were urban Appalachian.
When you told me about a month ago, and I never realized I was urban Appalachian.
Exactly.
So thank you.
Well, thank you for having that conversation with me. But so what I also want to just start with too, and this is kind of where our conversation began, is if you could just tell me where you grew up, what community you grew up in, and a little bit about your family situation while you were growing up.
Yeah, so I grew up in over the Rhine in Cincinnati, Ohio, as a kid, and what can I say about that?
Yeah, so tell me about your mom and your dad. We started, I know when we had the conversation, I sort of dug in a little bit deeper because knowing when and where you grew up, I suspected that you might have some Appalachian roots. So tell me, why don't you tell me first about your mom and kind of where she came from and just more about your family.
She was born and raised in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then of course at some point moved up here.
Do you know why?
I have no idea.
Do you
why she
know why?
moved here.
Okay,
No,
yeah.
I don't know.
But when, probably, it was before she was married, right? So before.
I would I'd
Yeah.
have to guess so. That was before she was married. Actually,
Yeah.
I don't know that. I don't know the age she was married.
Yeah, huh,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, so she moved up here and moved to Over the Rhine, which is where you grew up. So you weren't a single kid though, right? I know you had sibs, and I know you grew up with your mom and your dad. So just
Well, I
if you don't
actually
mind talking
grew
a
up.
little bit about
It was
that.
well, I was only a short period of time with my father.
Oh, okay, I didn't
So,
know that. Yeah.
So actually, it was more my mother
Mhm.
with 6 kids,
Wow.
and my father actually ended up moving out to the suburbs.
Huh.
So
So talk about growing up in Over the Rhine. What did you do? Where'd you go to school?
I went to a
Just
school
giving me-
called Rothenburg, which
Uh-huh.
is still there. I think it's
Yeah,
not
it
been there
is.
for 100 years,
Yeah.
oddly enough. And what did we do? We basically played on the sidewalks was our grass.
Yeah.
The way that we lived.
Yeah, what street? What street? Do you remember what street you
Yeah, I
were
do.
on?
I lived on McMicken.
Okay, yeah.
Right above a bar.
Okay,
On that.
yeah.
So we got free music every night until 2 in the morning. How lucky.
And so you had 5 brothers and sisters? Were you the youngest, the oldest?
So I have 4 sisters and
Okay.
1 brother.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where are you in that
I am
lineup?
number 4.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you grew up in a.
This is gonna be on you. You're gonna have to really.
Now see, when I don't have this camera in front of our face, Jim is telling me the whole.
I think it's
whole
totally. It
story.
really is totally different.
Yeah, it is. It's
yeah.
funny. Well, just ignore it. Just
Okay.
if you as much as you
I'll
can.
try to then.
Yeah. So you grew up in Over the Rhine. You, I remember you told me a little bit about your dad, though, that you weren't sure where he was but where he lived or where he was from.
I don't know where he was originally
yeah.
from, correct.
Yeah. And when I asked you what he did for a living, I remember that you told me that you weren't sure, but you thought he fixed things. Is that right?
Yeah, he actually, I he actually would find appliances, or work for a company that had appliances that would break. And he actually would take them and fix them and sell them. So I think at some point he was just kind of a junk guy. He literally just went and, that's a good question. I don't know how he sort of made money. As far as I know is the appliances, and I don't think he made very much money, but he seemed to make, I guess, enough to make it.
And it's, you know, you weren't talking about being hungry.
No, but you know, I think my mother either got Social Security because my father died when I was 19. But even before that, I think she just lived off the system.
Yeah.
I think whatever that system is, whether it's, I guess it would be a welfare. I don't know how else one gets money.
With 6 kids, that would be helpful, I would think, to be able to get some aid for dependent children and food stamps and.
Yeah, so she didn't work, so she clearly was getting, and I don't think it was very much money at all.
Right.
Literally a few $100, as far as I know, or maybe more than that, in the 70s.
Yeah.
A month.
Yeah. So you went to Rothenburg for elementary school.
Correct.
Did you like it? Did you like school?
I loved Rothenburg. Yeah, I did. So even though my mother was, you know, not educated and didn't have much money, but she had strong morals. She really made sure we got to school and did what we had to do. So, I mean, a really lovely woman. Yeah. And I can't even imagine, you know, what kind of stress one has, you know, having 6 kids to feed and get off and you know, keep them together.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your favorite subjects?
Probably math. I would say we had a terrific math teacher.
Yeah.
And then there was a really good science gym teacher who did both.
Yeah.
I think it might have been back in the day. There might have been more teachers that did more than one thing.
Yeah, that would make sense, especially in elementary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I would say math was.
And how long were you there at Rothenburg?
I think I was there for 7 years. I went from kindergarten to 6th grade.
Okay, and then after that?
After that, I went to a school called Porter.
Okay.
You ever heard of Porter?
Yeah, absolutely. That's up in Price Hill, isn't it?
No, it's actually on. I think it's considered like the west side of Cincinnati, where the soccer stadium is now.
Oh, okay. Yes, actually, I do. I now that you're saying that, I do remember Porter. I remember visiting students there when I worked for the Urban Appalachian.
Yeah, and that was, I think most of the kids that went there were from the projects. I mean, at one point I was the only white kid.
Yeah. Now that probably wasn't true at Rothenburg, though, was it?
No, Rothenburg was not. No, it was probably very much 50-50.
Yeah. Yeah, because that would have been a time when a lot of kids from urban Appalachian families would have been living in over the Rhine. So how'd you like Porter?
I didn't like that so much.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta put into words. I don't know. You sort of get to that age where I don't know, you're kind of maybe more rebellious.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I did go to school, I wasn't crazy about Porter.
Yeah. And so that would have been 7th and 8th grade?
That would have been 7th and 8th grade, correct.
And then did you go to Taft after that?
No, I think that would have been the high school I went to, but that's when I ended up actually moving with my father in the suburbs.
Oh, so you moved, I didn't realize that. So you moved with, I remember you said you moved out to Coleraine, is that right? Coleraine Township?
Yeah, and actually that's when my father lived. So my father he was remarried.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up living with him and his new wife.
Yeah.
Through the 9th grade.
Got it.
And then, so here's a part of the story you don't know. So,
okay,
good.
Yeah, good. That means you'll just tell it to me,
right?
right?
Tell
it, Jim.
So I was just there through the 9th grade, and I think my father and his wife must have had some kind of whatever was going on with them. You know, typically you don't always know the ins and outs of adults and stuff. But at some point, my stepmother took me back downtown and dropped me off. Wow. Like she was like, okay, I'm done with this kid.
Oh, no.
And I don't remember necessarily being sort of, you know, a bad kid, but I think she had, you know, not a good relationship with my father.
Yeah.
And I remember dropping me off and me literally going and catching a bus and going back.
Wow.
Literally took, I think, 2 buses, maybe
Jeez.
3 buses to get back to Coleraine. But then I was like, where the hell do I live?
Yeah.
So then I actually went to live with, this part you don't know, I went to live with my sister. I had, my oldest sister actually had moved out there and had an apartment. And she had a child. So I was living with my sister and her like 2-year-old son. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. No, I didn't know that part of the story. But I mean, obviously, when you moved from over the Rhine to Coleraine, that you didn't want to go back. You didn't want to go back.
No. There was clearly a difference, and I was at that age where you sort of know, like, okay, there's a big difference. And one was just grass. I mean, to be in an area where there's grass, I thought the people were rich. Like, oh my God, I have grass.
Yeah.
So actually, I lived with my sister for about a year, and I don't remember exactly why, but one of the guys I became friends with, his name was Dave. His mother was from over the Rhine, and she had heard the story and actually called my mother and said, she said, if it's okay, Jim can come live with us. So actually, through high school, I actually lived with an entire different family.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was, and so she had 3 kids that lived at home and included me into this family of a 3-bedroom house with 4 kids, and she was married with 3 kids. So Dave and I, through high school, slept in the same bed, and to this day are still very close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was, to talk a little bit more about the differences. So you kind of popped out of Porter, which you didn't really like, into a different high school, out of over the Rhine, where your yard was a sidewalk, into
Exactly right,
into a place with a little bit more room. So talk a little bit about how that felt to you as a teenager. Did it help with your rebellion?
Well, I think it did, because you sort of felt, at least for me, I felt like people were rich. And of course, now I know they were not rich, but they felt rich, and I kind of felt like I fit in. It wasn't like I was sort of this oddball. It was almost like this was a better fit for me. I thought they were rich, but of course, I mean, these people were, best middle class. So it actually wasn't a struggle. I mean, I ended up sort of going to high school and playing sports and graduating and so forth.
And then what happened for you after high school?
I graduated, so I was living with a family, and it was a nice family. Unfortunately, the woman Diane's husband was a second husband, so he was a stepfather, and kind of a classic jackass stepfather. So literally after I graduated, 1 week after, me and a good friend jumped in a car and drove to California.
Wow.
And we were off and running with big $300 in my pocket.
Well, what'd you do in California?
We ended up staying on, so Dave, I went with, his brother was in the Navy and had a room in the Navy base, so we kind of shacked up with him in San Diego. And then I think his girlfriend had an apartment, so we actually stayed with her sometimes, and then stayed on the Navy base, and we were there for about, I think, a year in San Diego. And then realized, okay, we got to figure something out, and then drove back to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to ask you what you do for a living, because that would be silly.
Right.
But maybe if you could tell the story about sort of how you came into this work, because, gosh, I've known you longer than I've known my husband. And I've been
That's
married
true.
for 16 years now, so I'm
Wow.
thinking maybe 20 years
Oh, yeah,
for
it's
now.
every bit
So
20
that's,
years.
and you were well established in your career then. So so we're talking about maybe in the 80s you came back from California?
Yeah, I think it was 83,
Yeah.
and then 2 years later, you get to the age where you're 20, 21, at least most, you have to figure something out. It's like, okay, it's kind of getting real, and you gotta decide on something. So I think I was 21 or 22 and applied to hair school.
Uh-huh.
And it was sort of a 2-year program,
Yeah.
and that was another just good fit. You know,
Yeah.
some of this stuff I think might have been kind of luck. You know, to have a family that's willing to take you in.
Yeah.
You know, not knowing you that well, and then you know, going to hair school and finding like, wow, this kind of fits.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in a 2-year program. So I finished in '87.
Okay.
So I was probably, you're right, I probably already
Yeah.
done hair for
Maybe
10 years or something.
probably
Right,
at that point.
right.
I can't remember. Gosh, I'm gonna say maybe yes, 98 or so. So it might have been more like 25 years, really.
Yeah,
So
that's very,
yeah,
very it could be.
yeah. I followed Jim around. I stalk him.
That's true. I have gone to
From
I mean,
place
we're
to
talking
place.
a half dozen places.
That's
that,
right.
Right.
So now you can look him up by his name. He has his own business here at the Phoenix.
Yeah.
Out in
private studio now.
out in Madisonville. So I'm gonna jump forward just a little bit because we usually like to keep these less than 20 minutes or so, and I know that you got married and you had
Yep.
2 kids.
Correct.
And tell me about your kids, because you know it's like the story you're telling. You went to hair school, but you didn't go to college. But that's not the situation for your children, is it?
Correct. So yeah, of course I went to hair school and got married, had 2 kids. Kind of understood because my son, you know, when I went to visit my son in college, he asked me why I didn't go to college, and I realized a long time ago I wasn't prepped for college, and I thought that's a big part of going to school. So my ex-wife and I both prepped our kids for college, so they didn't know any better.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a big thing when you
Yeah.
you know, this is sort of where you headed, you know.
Yeah.
So both of my kids did go to college. One just recently graduated. The other's a senior in college. So it's a kind of a huge accomplishment, you know, to not go struggle from, you know, being in an area like that and then have 2 kids, you know, sort of go on and to do very well actually in college is.
Yeah, to do very well, and to not even have it be a question about whether or not they would do well. I mean, I think you knew that they would, to a certain degree. I mean, you
right.
don't. I'm sure there's always fears.
Yeah, there's always, but you kind of, you know, it's
Yeah.
all you talk about. You really, that's
Yeah.
all they knew. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so one last question for you, Jim, and that is.
I want more questions. I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
all right,
Right.
then we'll just
I'm
talk and
sorry.
talk and talk and
Right.
talk. Now, one last I wanted, and I can tell you're almost done with my hair too. So we're working. I'll let everybody see the results
Yeah.
before and after. But how do you think your background, your growing up, shaped you and helped make you who you are today?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think it's as a kid, there's so much that we take in, you know, that no one else would even know. So I think for me, just seeing as a kid, literally going downtown to, you know, uptown Cincinnati, and seeing people that just didn't look the same, you know, that looked like they had something. So there was that kind of like, there has to be better. It's just a matter of sort of figuring out and having the luck of, you know, the support of, you know, someone that's willing to help you out.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if that answers the question, but.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it does. That it's sort of knowing that that your situation was not the only possibility for you. Is that kind of
I think it's knowing and having. I mean, it's having, you know, people around that that are willing to help you.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you can, as a kid, it's so difficult, right? You're kind of trapped. There's only so much you can do until you get the support of others.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jim, both for the haircut and for the story. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to share?
I think one thing is, you know, my mother was wise enough to sign me up in the Big Brother, Little Brother program. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I had a big brother when I was about 10
Wow.
through the organization, and he was a fabulous person. And now it's 40 years later, and I still have a relationship with John Dietrich.
Oh, that's cool.
He's a stand-up guy. And I think he's another that you kind of watch the way he lives, you know, as a 10-year-old, and see, you know, how people prepare their food and so forth, and go to work on a daily basis. So I think it was 20 years later that I signed up to become a Big Brother,
cool.
and eventually became a Big Brother, you know, because of John, and I have my own little brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a cool story. And so what, and who, I mean, I know you can't tell names, but what's the situation of the person, of the young man that you're mentoring?
Well, he was just with his grandmother. He was a young African American boy, and his name was Tony, and I had a really good relationship with him. But the program is only for a year.
Got it.
Right, you commit to a year. And then I think they really hope, and I think there's a lot of cases, they hope that you keep a relationship. Yeah, and with this kid, I don't know what actually ended up happening to him.
Yeah.
But I was hoping, you know, to have the same, to have, it'd be great to have, you know, someone to mentor you and then to go back and do it. Yeah, so I don't know whatever happened to Tony.
Yeah, well, perhaps you will, when you have a little bit more time, you'll find your way back to the program again.
Yeah, well, might be a little, I think there's a certain age. That
They don't want grandpa's
they don't want to be when they're 50.
They won't big grandpa, little
right, it's right. Grandpa, little brother. Yeah, exactly right.
Oh, well. Well, you find other ways, I know, to support and to be helpful. And so I am going to go ahead and wrap this up, and so people won't think I'm in the witness protection program. I'll see if I can bring this down a little bit. And there's my face, and there's my haircut.
Yeah, we're about
and
finished.
There's Jim, yep. All right, thanks, Jim.
You're welcome, thank you.
Bye-bye.